We are at the 2026 Republican Party of Texas convention. I'm really grateful to sit here with Representative David Lowe. He's a taxpayer champion from kind of the northeast corner of Tarrant County in the DFW Metroplex. David, this is not your first convention, but we've been remarking with some folks how it feels a little bit different. Something's different this time. Usually, this is the time where everybody starts talking about unity. But I feel like there really is some unity this time. Is that because more conservatives have been elected this primary cycle? Do you think that there's real cohesion around the idea that these issues need our attention and the candidates that we've elected actually care about them, care about the issues, right?
Well, first, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
Secondly, I do believe there is unity behind the cost of living. And while there could always be more that is done, we've seen what the other side wants to do.
Right.
The other side just wants to burn money and give it away, and we want to return it back to the taxpayers.
Yeah. There's a huge appetite, I think, for reform generally, but especially in the way of rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse. Lots of candidates ran on doging Texas. Can you think of maybe some examples of stuff that you think we ought to take a look at in terms of finding waste, fraud, and abuse in the state?
You know, one of the biggest and under talked about fraud, waste, and abuse is bond debt.
Yeah.
You know,
No
the Texas Bond Review Board has Texas owing over $500 billion in local bond debt. We love to talk about the national debt. Well, we've got a debt crisis right here in Texas.
Yeah, I think we have the third most debt in the nation in Texas, and a lot of that has to do with the interest and sinking rates, the interest and sinking property taxes. We talk a lot about the M&O side, right, of the equation. Let's talk a little bit more about bonds. I know that you've had your district is the kind of place with a lot of schools, a lot of school districts. You've encountered these bonds a lot. What are some of the tactics that you're seeing being employed now to try to rush and usher these bonds in and through? And what are maybe some ideas that you've got in order to help rein it in?
Well, it's very frustrating. For example, my school district, Birdville ISD, owed $800 million in bond debt, and they just added another $475 million.
Oh my goodness.
And that doesn't even include the interest.
Right.
Okay. And then they use taxpayer-funded resources to promote their bonds, and that is a problem in itself.
We've even seen examples where they're rolling like the marketing costs and stuff of the packages into the bond. You know, it's just really egregious. Tell us more about it.
Well, look, somebody's getting rich off of $475 million. And the problem that I have with public education is they love to label us conservatives as hating public education. That is absolutely the furthest thing from the truth. For me, I want more money going into teachers' pockets and in the classroom. You know, M&O is very important, and I want people to understand that, especially teachers. You know, you can buy these stadiums or new schools, things like that with the bond, but the maintenance and operation cost comes out of the same pot that pays teachers' salaries. Teachers should be the most angry about new schools and new stadiums because that money should go into their pockets.
Right. Yeah, I feel like over the last, and it's not even just a sentiment, we can objectively see where lots and lots of money that's been pumped into the government school system has ended up in the administration building and not in the classroom where the students and teachers are. So what do we do about that, David? How can Republicans and conservatives in particular who care about the taxpayer also communicate that we care about the teachers and our schools too?
Well, you know what? We have to demand bond reform. You know, I filed a bill last session that would have required 2/3 majority in order to pass a bond.
That's right.
Bonds are necessary. We cannot get rid of bonds, but raising everybody's individual debt as a citizen by only passing 50% plus one vote, that's unacceptable.
Right.
You know, and a lot of times these bond elections are only, the voting locations are being held at the schools, right? They're not being held in places that are normal polling locations. And so they are basically customizing their voting audience And that is just not right, because ultimately everybody pays the bond debt with their property taxes.
That's right. Yeah, some of the most egregious examples that we've seen of this too are school districts, one, overseeing their own elections, opting out of being held under the operations of their county elections administrators in office. There's even examples in where I live in Johnson County of two elections happening at the same time, right? So you have a municipal election for mayor and city council, and then you have to leave that voting location, go all the way across town to a different facility where you're going to have a different ballot that deals with either bond debt or the school board or whatever. So do you think perhaps having uniform election dates, moving all of this stuff to November is on the table in addition to the 2/3 voter approval you've talked about?
Absolutely. I think that we need to bring in as many voters as possible to so that they can have a say in the bond elections. I want to go back and hit on something. You know who pays for the mailers to promote all of these bonds? The same architecture firms and consulting firms that stand to make millions of dollars.
Right.
It is a corrupt system, and we have to change it. And again, we have over $500 billion in local bond debt, and it's not sustainable. You want to talk about lowering property taxes? A big portion of that is reforming how bonds work.
Yeah. So one of the problems, we're talking about education with State Representative David Lowe and the funding of our government schools. One of the factors that plays a huge role in all of this is the involvement of associations like TASB, Texas Association of School Boards. There has been a consensus, I think, among the delegates and especially the committee members that we've got to do something about banning taxpayer-funded lobbying, dealing with this issue. So talk to me about the role that TASB plays. How are they a participant in this whole system and process? And then what's been your personal experience in dealing with them and the presence of taxpayer-funded lobbying in the entire process?
So once you're elected to the school board, you begin the indoctrination by TASB. TASB is a taxpayer-funded lobbyist, and they come to the Capitol and advocate for school districts instead of the school board members doing their due diligence, getting in the car and driving to Austin to talk to me themselves.
Right.
TASB loves to push these agenda items onto the superintendents, and the superintendents often get free access to do whatever they want without accountability from the school board members who are elected. TASB actually came to my office, and we talked about some good issues, but then I told them I want to include immigration status on the enrollment form. I don't care what the federal government says. My constituents are getting railed by paying for illegal immigrants in their property taxes. So I told them that I was going to add the immigration question, and they turned as red can be. And they do not like it. They do not want illegals out of their public education system, because ultimately that will be less money for them. Right.
That issue and so many more, do you think can be fixed by banning taxpayer-funded lobbying? At least does that shift the game board a little bit back in the direction of the taxpayer?
Absolutely. You know what's frustrating about taxpayer-funded lobbying? There are elected officials all over the state that can literally pick up the phone or drive to Austin or go to a district office and advocate for this policy or that bill, whatever. But they don't. They basically pass the buck off to TASB, who speaks for them, when they as elected officials should come to me and speak to me directly. Right. We should not be paying for middlemen.
I think one of the problems too is you do have some local elected officials, David, that just straight up don't have the courage to put their name in testimony sheets and present in front of you against the very kinds of things they know the taxpayers are demanding from them.
Yes.
That's definitely a factor too, right?
So I was in Intergovernmental Affairs Committee, And I noticed that certain taxpayer-funded lobbyists would come testify for different towns and different areas of the state. Well, by God, why is that elected official not there? Why? Because they do not want to advocate for raising taxes themselves. They're cowards. If you're going to run saying that you want to lower taxes, then go on record and say it. If you want to raise taxes, come on record and say it. Put your name in the journal.
Right.
But they don't. They cower down and go to taxpayer-funded lobbyists to be their spokesman.
What does it mean for you as a lawmaker to get the legislative priorities that the delegates are going to vote on later tomorrow? Is that something? How does that factor into your lawmaking process as a state rep and a legislator?
To be honest with you, there's a lot of parties and a lot of events and there's a lot of drama going on here. But the only thing I really care about in this convention is the legislative priorities.
Wow.
I care about getting them, understanding them, and working on executing them. And I hope my colleagues will start taking the legislative priorities more seriously. You know, we've only had the legislative priorities since 2016.
Right.
But we have 8. Over 8,000 bills were filed last session. We have 140 days. We could literally get all 8 legislative priorities done in a week.
Do you feel like the grassroots are doing a better job using the legislative priorities, coming into the building, advocating for them? And do you feel like the appetite to take them into consideration is at least improving? I feel like last session, the folks working on the legislative priorities found more success than they did in the past. Is that because the advocates are being better, sharper, and doing a better job? Or is that because lawmakers are finally waking up and starting to realize we better listen to the folks over at the Republican Party of Texas?
I think that last legislative session, there was a lot of turnover in the primaries. And I think that some of the more establishment folks got a wake-up call. And so we did have some successes last session, but we could do a lot more. I also think that advocates are being way more vocal on social media and other platforms, expressing their concern and disappointment in legislators. And I think the accountability is improved. The messaging on accountability is improving. And I hope it continues, because ultimately we work for the constituents in our districts, but we are also representing the Republican Party, which means we need to pass the Republican Party of Texas priorities.
David, you're a taxpayer champion. You're one of the best performing lawmakers that Texans have in the building fighting for them. What's a message you have for voters, for delegates here in Houston, and then for the folks watching at home? Maybe some encouragement or a call to action, something that you're working on, you want them to know about, and go ahead and tell it to them now.
I want everybody to know that extremes move the middle. We must continue to push as far right and as much fiscal responsibility as possible. Are we going to get everything done? No. But if we take our foot off the gas, then the left will take back control. I want everybody to understand that we need to get back to basic governance. We have gotten so far off the path that we are funding and wasting money right and left, and it is not sustainable. We've got to get back to the basics of governance.
That's great. That's great. Hey, this is State Representative David Lowe. He's a taxpayer champion from the DFW area, a state rep. We're at the 2026 Republican Party of Texas convention here in Houston, and we'll have more coverage just like this one from right here coming up real quick.